This is not regulation, Missy. Floors for Marines who matter, not whoever wandered in off the contract gate. The words came from behind her, loud, pitched for an audience. She did not turn around. 7 in the morning, the hangar smelled of jet fuel and cold steel, and the burnt coffee tang of a maintenance shift that had run all night. Light came in flat and gray through the high bay doors, 40 meters of polished concrete, 2 FA-18 Hornets up on jacks, panels open, guts exposed. A woman in a plain sage flight suit knelt at the port wheel, well of the nearest jet. A pen light held in her teeth, reading the brake line like a sentence someone else had written badly. She wore no name tape, no rank, no unit patch, just came off the concrete in sheets. Blank squares of Velcro where all 3 should have been, to the 3 mechanics watching from the airframe's corner that made her nobody. A contractor, a depot rep who had wandered onto a flight line she had no business standing on. Sergeant Mason Poot decided to fix that. He crossed the floor with the walk of a man who owned it. 27 years old, sleeves rolled to regulation, a grin already loaded. He stopped behind her. Sheets. Reached down and flicked the regulation bun at the back of her head. When she did not move, he closed his fist around it and pulled hard to bring her up. I sat up. You do not touch a jet on my floor. He laughed, the kind of laugh that needed an audience and had one. 2 younger Marines by the tool crib laughed a half-second late. One of them, a lance corporal named Rene Salas, did not laugh at all. She looked at the floor. The woman rose slow, square. She came up out of the crouch 1 vertebrae at a time, and when she was standing, she turned and looked at Sergeant Poot with eyes that held absolutely nothing. No anger, no fear, no surprise. She let the silence run 1 full beat. Then she said 1 word, noted, flat, final. She turned back to the panel as though he were weather, as though the hand in her hair had been a draft from an open door. Her pen light went back to the brake line, to a single safety wire wound the wrong way around a nut. It should have gone into a barrier net at 140 knots before it ever caught. Poot blinked. He had expected a flinch. He had expected a stammer, a step back, the small, ugly pleasure of watching a stranger shrink. He had gotten a 1-word weather report, and a back turned to hymns, as though he were furniture. It landed wrong in his chest, and, because he could not name the feeling, he did what men like him always do with a feeling they cannot name. He covered it louder. Yeah, you are done here, sweetheart. Walk it off the line. He swaggered back toward his shop. He narrated his own victory to the 2 who would still laugh. He did not. Notice the woman lift a small camera. She photographed the reversed safety wire twice, with a timestamp. Came off the concrete in sheets, and he did not notice the man in the tool crib who had watched the whole thing without moving. Master Sergeant Harlan Voss had run hangar floors for 26 years. 46 years old, gray at the temples. A maintenance chief, who had buried 2 friends out of aircraft that flew when they should have been grounded. He had watched the concrete in sheets. Matched 1,000 people pretend to know aircraft. He had never once watched a stranger read a brake line the way this woman read it. Eyes moving in the exact order of a pre-flight, panel to fastener, to safety wire. The geometry of someone whose hands had lived inside cockpits. He noticed her watch. It was turned face inward on her wrist, the way operators wore them. So a dial would never catch the light at the wrong moment. He noticed she had not raised her voice. She had not looked at Poot's hand, and had looked instead at the jet. Voss had learned over 26 years which people to trust in a hangar. It was never the loudest. It was the one who looked at the aircraft first. He sat down his coffee. He walked back toward his office. A manila folder of change of command orders had been sitting on his desk for 3 days. unread, past the first page. 2 days out from the ceremony. New group commander inbound, some colonel, a pilot. He had not looked at the photograph in the packet yet. Behind him, the quiet woman in the stripped flight suit finished, photographing the wheel well. She straightened and let her eyes travel the length of the maintenance line. Bay 1, Bay 2, Bay 3, Bay 4. Counting open panels, reading the floor the way other people read a clock face. Sergeant Poot's laugh still echoed off the high steel ceiling. He had pulled the hair of the only person in the building who already knew exactly how many of his jets were lying. He just did not know it yet. None of them did, and the woman with blank Velcro, where her eagles should have been, was in no hurry at all to tell them. She finished at the wheel well and rose, and she let her gaze travel the line one more time. Bay 1, Bay 2, Bay 3, Bay 4. She counted open panels and red X tags, and the small wrong things a careless shop leaves behind. A dropped lock wire here. A panel fastener cross-threaded there. A torque stripe smeared where someone had backed off a bolt they had already signed as final. Each one was a sentence. Together they told a story, and the story was not a good one. Across the floor, Lance Corporal Renee Salas watched the contractor read the jets and felt something she could not name. The woman had been dragged up by the hair and had not so much as raised her voice. Salas had seen plenty of people pretend to be calm. She had never seen anyone actually be it. It unsettled her more than shouting would have. She had 2 days. She intended to use every minute. The hangar doors let in the gray morning, and the gray morning did not care who anybody was. Not yet. The FOD walk started at 0730. Foreign object debris, a loose washer, a dropped safety pin, a stray bolt. Any of it could go through a turbine blade at full power and turn a $40 million aircraft into scrap and a funeral. Came off the concrete in sheets, so every morning the maintenance crews walked the floor shoulder to shoulder, heads down, picking up anything that did not belong. The woman in the Sage Flight suit walked it too, off to the side uninvited, watching. A torque wrench was missing from a shadow board, near Bay 2. The shop noticed at the worst possible moment, mid-walk, hands full. And the young mechanic running the board swore under his breath. He started the long process of accounting for a calibrated tool nobody could find. The woman spoke without breaking stride. Bin 3 under the drip pan, 48-inch pounds still set on it. The mechanic stared at her, still stared at her. She had not opened bin 3. She had not been within 10 feet of bin 3. The concrete in sheets. She had read the room the way other people read a clock. And the clock said the wrench had rolled off the bench and under the pan during the night shift. He opened bin 3. The wrench was under the drip pan. The dial read 48-inch pounds. He looked at her with the particular respect of a man who works with his hands for someone who clearly does too. "Ma'am, you with the depot team?" "Reliability," she said, walking the line. 2 words for a 3-word question. She gave him exactly the technical answer the technical question deserved, and not 1 syllable more. Then she moved on, down the line toward Bay 4. Master Sergeant Voss watched from the edge of the walk. He had seen the wrench thing. He had seen the way she said reliability like a billet, not a guess. At Bay 4, she stopped. The Hornet at Bay 4 had been signed off the night before. Complete up. Ready for the morning's flight schedule. Its maintenance record wore a clean green stamp and a set of initials. The woman crouched at the port main landing gear, put her pen light on the brake line, and went very still. "Counter tension," she said, not loud to no one and to the record at once. "Port brake line safety wire run against the nut, not with it." Voss crossed to her before he had decided to. He looked where she looked. He had run brake lines for 2 decades, and he saw it the moment she put the light on it. The wire wound the wrong way, so that the vibration of a landing rollout would back the fitting off instead of holding it. Counter-tension. 2 words that could put a jet into the barrier at 140 knots with a pilot strapped to it. This was signed off last night. Voss said it was signed off wrong. He straightened, walked to the maintenance control desk, and pulled the Bay 4 record. The green stamp, the initials. He knew the initials. He had watched them get rushed onto a dozen records this month on fly day mornings. Fast, ahead of schedule, ahead of the actual work. Who signed Bay 4? He said to the desk, to himself. The clipboard said the jet was perfect. The woman in the stripped flight suit, the one a sergeant had dragged up by the hair an hour ago, said it was not. And Master Sergeant Harlan Sheets and Sergeant Harlan Voss spent 26 years learning which of those 2 things to believe. He had buried 2 friends in his career, came off the concrete and Sheets, both of them out of aircraft that someone had signed as ready. Neither aircraft had been ready. He had learned the lesson at the worst possible tuition, and he had never once forgotten the price of a green stamp on a red X jet. When did the night crew sign this off? He asked the desk. Oh, 200, the maintenance controller said, reading the log. Pencil whipped fast. Whole batch came through in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. 4 aircraft. Voss had worked brake lines his entire adult life, and he could not properly inspect and document 1 in 20 minutes, let alone 4. Nobody could, which meant the work had not been done. Only the signing had been done. He believed the woman. He looked back across the floor at her. She had already moved on. Bay 5 now, reading panels, counting, her face giving away nothing, her watch turned in toward the pulse at her wrist. She had not gloated. She had not raised her voice to the room. She had found a lie that could kill a pilot, named it in 11 words, and kept walking. Voss had a folder on his desk he still had not finished reading, a photograph he still had not looked at. He was beginning to think he should. Across the hangar in the airframe's corner, Sergeant Pruitt watched the contractor crouch at his jets, point at his records, and walk his floor like she was taking inventory of him. He did not like inventory. He did not like inventory. He decided the contractor needed to learn the floor a second time, and that this time the lesson would not be a joke. By 0900, she had a name on the floor, and it was not her own. Contract girl. Pruitt had coined it within the hour, and the shop had taken it up. A shop will always take up whatever its loudest sergeant hands it. He narrated her around the hangar for the amusement of anyone who would listen, stepping into her path on the way to Bay 4, making her wait, making a show of it, make a hole. Contract girls inspecting. Mind the jets, sweetheart. They are real. He thought the floor was his. He had no idea whose name was on the door of the office at the end of it. The woman did not argue. Arguing was loud, and loud collected attention instead of evidence. She collected. She photographed the Bay 4 record, and the reversed safety wire, and the shadow board. Each frame time stamped, each one quiet, methodical, sterile. When Pruitt blocked her path, she waited until he moved. When the shop laughed, she let the laughter wash past her without leaving a mark. Her stillness never cracked. She absorbed the whole performance, the way stone absorbs rain. Quiet, it turned out, kept its receipts. Dank tui sheets, a staffer pulled rank and ended it in a sentence. A loud person would have shouted the floor down and lost. The woman did not either, because she understood something never would. A threat, answered in kind, becomes a fight, and a fight becomes 2 stories. and 2 stories let a guilty man hide in the doubt between them. There would be no doubt. She would came off the concrete and sheets. She would not give him a story to set against hers. She would give him a stack of time-stamped photographs, a chain of records, and a witness, and she would hand all of it to the one person in 2 days who could not be shouted down, so she let him call her contract girl. She let him block the path to Bay 4. She filed each insult away the way she filed everything, neatly, edges true, and she kept walking the line. Lance Corporal Renee Salas found her at Bay 4 when Put had stepped away to hold court by the coffee mess. 21 years old, 8 months on the floor, and frightened of exactly one thing more than she was, frightened of Sergeant Put, a jet going off the end of the runway with a friend inside it. "Ma'am," Salas said, low and fast, "Bay 4 is not the only one. Sign-offs get rushed before fly days, whole batch of them this month. I have seen the records go green before the work is done." The woman looked at her. Really looked for the first time all morning, and something in the flat eyes warmed by a single degree. Names on those sign-offs. Same initials every time. Put caught Salas talking and crossed the floor fast. "You giving tours now, Salas? Get back to your shop." "She found the wire, Sergeant." Salas did not step back. "I did not tell her where. She found it herself." Put's grin thinned into something colder. He leaned in off the concrete in sheets, close to the woman in the sage flight suit. He dropped his voice below the reach of the room and let the joke fall away entirely. "Whatever you think you saw, nobody here saw it. You write up one record. It is your word against the whole floor, and the floor does not lose. Remember that." The woman held his stare. She did not answer. She had a camera full of time-stamped photographs and a memory that had once held an entire close air support frequency under fire. And she did not off the concrete in sheets, and she did not waste either on a threat from a man who signed nothing himself. She simply went back to the panel. The floor is 2 days from turning, and when it turns, it is going to turn all at once. Because the woman they were calling contract girl was not going to raise her voice. She was not going to swing stet and sheets. She was going to wait for the one morning when the whole hangar would be standing at attention anyway, and a single command would rearrange every man in it. Put walked off to enjoy his floor while he still had it. Behind him, the quiet woman photographed one more record, checked the time on the watch, turned in toward her wrist, and counted the hours. 2 of the younger Marines were no longer laughing at all. Put's answer to a problem he could not solve with a joke was a problem he could solve with a form. He found Staff Sergeant Bo Tackett in the Quality Assurance Shack. 33 years old, the man whose initials sat in green on the Bay 4 record and on a month of records like it. Tackett signed jets up. It was the easiest authority and sheets. It was the easiest authority in the building to abuse and the hardest to question, because questioning it meant calling a fellow Marine a liar in writing. "The contractor is a problem," Put said. "She is at Bay 4. She is photographing records." Tackett did not look up for a moment. Then he reached for a security incident form. "Then she is not a contractor anymore," he said. "She is an unescorted civilian putting hands on aircraft. Write it clean, unbadged on the line, refuse to identify herself. They will walk her off the floor by noon, and whatever she photographed goes off with her." Tackett signed the jets. Tackett signed the lie about the woman who had caught him signing the jets. He was, the hangar would later agree, very good at signing things that were not true. "You sure about this?" Tackett said, pen hovering. "She catches a single thing on those records, and it is my name on them. She is a contractor with a camera and no badge." Put said, "Who is anyone going to believe? The floor or some Depot rep who cannot even keep her patches on straight. Sign it. Get her gone. Tackett signed it. It was, he would later understand, the single worst signature of a career built on bad signatures. Came off the concrete in sheets, because the security report put his crime in writing on the same morning. The only person who could read it walked the floor. The security detail came at 10:40. 2 Marines, polite, firm, a little embarrassed. There was a report, unescorted civilian. They would need her to come with them and clear the flight line. The woman in the Sage flight suit did not argue. She did not produce a badge. She did not say a name that would have ended the entire morning in 4 syllables. She had 2 days and a plan, and no intention of spending the reveal early on a pair of junior Marines doing their honest jobs. She complied, and on her way off the floor, she stopped at the crate control desk, the maintenance control desk, and said one thing clearly for the record. Loud enough that 3 people heard it, and one of them wrote it down. Ground Bay 4. Counter, tension on the port brake line. Check the night sign off against the torque log. Do it before anyone straps into that aircraft. Then she walked out of the hangar unhurried, a removed contractor on a security form, and did not look back. In the airframe's corner, Pruitt watched her go and felt the floor settle back into his hands. Told you, he said to the shop. Word against the floor. Floor wins. Tackett shredded nothing. He did not need to. The records already said the jets were perfect in green in his own hand. A removed civilian's accusation was air. The paperwork was concrete. The paperwork was concrete. But the woman had said 11 words at the maintenance desk, and Master Sergeant Voss had heard all 11. Voss could not overrule a security removal. He had no authority over who stood on the flight line. But he had absolute authority over one thing no sergeant and no staff sergeant could touch. He could ground an aircraft. A maintenance chief who believed a jet was unsafe could red tag it and dare anyone to fly it over his signature. He walked to Bay 4 with a red impound tag in his hand. He matched the concrete and sheets. He matched the safety wire to what the woman had said, counter tension against the nut, and he tied the tag to the landing gear himself. Then he pulled the records for every jet Tackett had signed that week. 4 of them carried the same rushed green stamp, the same initials, the same fly day haste. I am not signing a jet into the sky. On Tackett's word, Voss told the maintenance control desk, flat and final. Bay 4 is grounded. So is anything he touched this week. Nobody fuels these aircraft until I have seen the work done with my own eyes. Tackett came off the concrete in sheets. Tackett had heard about the red tags within the hour and came to the maintenance control desk to argue. He was the quality assurance authority. Grounding his signed aircraft was, he said, a slap at his judgment. Take it up the chain, Staff Sergeant, Voss said without looking up. I will put my reasons in writing. You put yours. Let us see whose reasons read better to an inspector. Tackett did not take it up the chain. A man with clean records welcomes an inspector. A man with 20-minute sign-offs on 4 aircraft does not. He went back to his shack and said nothing. And his silence told Voss more than any argument could have. 4 red tags went onto 4 aircraft. 4 records went into a folder on Voss' desk, next to a second folder he had finally decided to open. The change of command packet. He had walked the removed contractor off his mind a dozen times that morning, and she had walked right back on. The stillness, the watch turned inward, the 11 words at the desk that had read like an order because they had been built like one. Aircraft, then people. The geometry of someone who had spent a career inside cockpits. Voss opened the packet to the page he had skipped 3 days running. The incoming commanding officer's official photograph looked back at him. Eagles on the collar, service uniform, a row of ribbons, led by a distinguished flying cross with a valor device and a purple heart. The face beneath the cover was composed, unsmiling, and entirely familiar. The same eyes, the same stillness. The woman from the wheel well, Colonel Adrian Marlowe, call sign Kestrel. Incoming commander of the Marine Aircraft Group, of this hangar, of this floor, of Sergeant Mason Pewitt and Staff Sergeant Bo Tackett and every red-tagged jet on it. Master Sergeant Voss sat down hard in his chair. The photograph wore eagles. The woman on his floor had worn blank Velcro. Fun on muss. They had the same eyes, and Voss did the arithmetic, and felt the whole hangar tilt a degree under him. A sergeant had pulled her hair, had called her nobody, had laughed for an audience, and in 2 days, she was going to walk back through those bay doors and own every man who had watched it happen. Voss did not pick up a phone. He did not announce it to the floor. A reveal like that was not his to spend. It belonged to the woman in the photograph, and he had the strong crete and sheets, and he had the strong sense she would spend it precisely at a moment of her own choosing to the maximum possible effect. But he could do 2 things, and he did them. He found Lance Corporal Salas in the airframe's corner, drew her aside, and spoke low. "Write down exactly what you saw at Bay 4. Everything. Date it. Sign it. Do not show Tackett. Do not show Pewitt. Do not show anyone. Put it in your cargo pocket and keep it there. Master Sergeant, am I in trouble?" "No." He almost smiled. "If she is who I think she is, you are going to be very glad you wrote it. That is all I can say." Then he went to find Pewitt. He did not tell him. He gave him a tell him. He gave him a chance because that was what a maintenance chief owed even a man he had stopped respecting. "Square your shop away before the ceremony, Sergeant," Voss said. "All of it. The records, the floor, your mouth. New commander walks in 2 days. You want to be clean when that happens." Pewitt laughed. The contractor was gone. The jets were signed. The new commander was a colonel, a pilot, a name on a ceremony program. "Relax, Master Sergeant. New CO is a pilot. Pilots do not crawl wheel wells. She will cut a ribbon, give a speech, and never set foot in the airframe's corner." "This one does," Voss said. "She crawled yours yesterday. You had better hope she did not see what I think she saw." He walked away before Pewitt could turn it into a joke. Behind him, he heard the shop laugh, and the laugh sounded thinner than it had that morning. The way a thing sounds when 2 of the people who used to laugh have gone quiet and stayed that way. Voss replayed it on the walk back. The inward watch, the 3-word answers, the break line read like a sentence, the 11 words built like an order, every detail that had said operator instead of contractor. The threat in his hangar had never been the woman, it had been the paperwork. He'd come off the concrete in sheets, and the paperwork was about to meet the only person in the building it could not lie to. Here is the part the hangar did not know, the part only you get to see. The 7 minutes that made a quiet woman into a call sign. That night, Colonel Adrian Marlowe Tatent sat alone in temporary quarters with the change of command packets squared on the table and a single photograph propped beside it. 2 pilots beside a jet, helmets under their arms, squinting into a desert sun 15 years gone. One of them was her at 29. The other was Captain Liam Ostro, call sign Drifter, 2011. She had been 29 years old, a captain 6 years into the cockpit. The radio call that had given her a name had been the worst 7 minutes of her life. And she had never once thought of the name without thinking of the minutes not. A Marine patrol had been pinned in a dry riverbed, danger close. Enemy on 3 sides of a wash, with no way out that did not cross open ground. 14 Marines on the floor of that wadi, with the walls coming in. Marlowe and Ostro had been the air over them. 2 Hornets stacked in the dark, and then the fuel state had gone red. Bingo fuel. The number that meant turn for home while you still could. The patrol on the ground had no home to turn for, so she stayed. "Kestrel, you are past bingo." Ostro's voice in her ears, steady the way he was always steady. "We are past bingo." "One more pass," she had said. "Keep them off the wash." One more pass became 2. 2 became the kind of math that does not add up to a safe landing. She put her aircraft between 14 Marines and the men trying to kill them, again and again, low and loud. Skeets d. Until the relief section finally checked in on the frequency and the walls of the wadi stopped closing. Somewhere in those minutes, her jet took the hit. A hard jolt, a warning panel lighting like a city. A controllability she would fight all the way back to the boat. She brought it home. Battle damaged, flamed out on one side. She brought it home. Ostro's jet took its hit in the same dark. He did not bring his home. She had flown wing on drifter for 6 years. He had been the steady one, sheet. One. The one who talked a nervous lieutenant through his first night trap. The one who never drifted off a contract, no matter how the weather or the war tried to push him. He had a wife in North Carolina, and a daughter who had just learned to walk. He had told Marlowe once over a bad cup of coffee on a worse night that came off the concrete in sheets that the only thing he was afraid of was leaving the kid before she was old enough to remember his face. She had told him he was being morbid. She had told him pilots, like him, did not leave. She had been wrong, and she had been wrong with 14 other men's lives in the balance. And there had been no version of those 7 minutes that bought back the 8th. The patrol walked out. 14 Marines, every one of them, up the wadi and onto the relief section's vehicles alive. And the frequency that had carried Drifter's voice for 6 years carried only static on the long level flight back, while she called his call sign into the dark, and the dark did not answer. They gave her the call sign after. Kestrel, the small falcon that holds its exact position in a headwind, wings working, and does not drift. There was a cruelty in the name she had never said aloud. Because the man who had drifted was the one who had not come back. They gave her the distinguished in sheets. They gave her the distinguished flying cross with a valor device for the 7 minutes that had saved 14 men. She would have handed it back, ribbon and medal and citation. For the 8th minute she had not been able to save one. That was the thing concrete in sheets. That was the thing the hangar did not know about the woman a sergeant had dragged up by the hair. They had seen blank Velcro and decided it meant nobody. They had not seen the weight she carried under it. The price already paid in full for every eagle on the collar of that photograph. The 14 men who had children now, because a 29-year-old captain had refused to turn for home. Marlowe set the photograph upright on the table. She squared the change of command packet beside it. Edges true the way she squared everything. In 36 hours, she would walk back into that hangar, in her own uniform, under her own name, and the floor that had laughed would learn what the blank Velcro had been hiding. She did not relish it. Relishing it was Poot's habit, not hers, but she intended to be very, very precise. She turned off the lamp. In the dark, the desert photograph was just a pale rectangle, and the only sound was a woman breathing sound slow and even, The way she had taught herself to breathe at bingo fuel when staying cost everything, and she stayed anyway. Change of command morning came up, clear and hot, a hard blue sky over the air station, and not a cloud in it. The hangar had been transformed overnight. The floor was swept to a shine. The grounded jets sat to one side, under their red tags. Folding chairs ran in ranks across the open bay. A small reviewing stand stood at the head of the floor. Shidwat. And the Marines of the group fell into formation in their service uniforms, while the sun climbed and the temperature with it. Sergeant Poot rode the morning high. The contractor was a week-old memory. His jets were signed. He had a ceremony to stand through, and then a floor to run for whatever pilot they handed him. He found one last piece of business first. He found Lance Corporal Salas in the airframe's corner away from the formation. And he had heard, shops always hear, that she had written something down. "Last chance, Salas," he said low, crowding her against the workbench. "There was nothing at Bay 4, say it. Tear up whatever you wrote and say there was nothing." Salas was 21 years old and terrified, and she did not move. There was countertension at Bay 4. "Sergeant," she said, "I am not going to unsee it." He shoved her, a two-handed shove into the bench, her toolbox clattering to the concrete, sockets rolling across the floor. And for the first time all week, the floor moved toward the shoved instead of the shover. 2 Marines were already stepping in, hands out, voices rising. The culture that had laughed on Monday turning on its own axis by Friday. The shop did not close around Puit this time. It opened against him. At the edge of the floor, near Master Sergeant Voss, a woman in a Marine service uniform watched it happen from across the hangar, at a distance in the crowd of arriving staff. She read as just another field-grade officer come for the ceremony. Poot's eyes had slid over her twice, already without catching. She did not move to stop the shove. The concrete in sheets. She let him finish writing his own indictment in front of witnesses. The way you let a man dig until the hole is deep enough. But her eyes went first out of an old unbreakable habit to the red impound tag on Bay 4. Confirming the jet was still grounded, still safe, still where the danger could not reach a pilot. Aircraft, then people. The order never changed. It had not changed at bingo fuel over a dry wadi, and it did not change now on a swept hangar floor. And it was the single clearest tell she had. The heat off the concrete in sheets, the habit of a person who had learned in the one place the lesson is taught for keeps, that the machine kills you faster than the man. She watched the 2 Marines. Steady Salas. She watched a third gather the spilled sockets back into the toppled toolbox. She watched the shop that had laughed on Monday refuse to laugh on Friday. And she filed that away too, because a floor that turns on a bully on its own is a floor worth commanding. Then her eyes went to Poot. He felt the weight of being watched and turned. He found the field-grade officer looking at him, and somewhere underneath the service uniform and the distance, his memory caught up. "You," he said, and his voice tried for the old swagger and missed. "You again. You do not quit, do you, contract girl?" She smiled at him. It was the first time all week she had smiled, and it was not a kind smile, and it was not an angry one. It was the smile of someone who had already won, and was simply waiting patiently for the room to find out the score. Puit did not understand the smile. It made his skin crawl in a way the contractor's silence never had. He pushed off the workbench and stepped toward her to throw her off his floor a second time, mouth already opening on a joke that would never land. And behind him, a side door of the hangar swung open. A vehicle pulled to the threshold with a red flag on the fender, bearing 2 white stars, and a senior aide's voice carried across the suddenly quieting floor. Puit did not see it. He was still looking at the woman who was smiling at him. Master Sergeant Harlan Voss saw it. Voss had been waiting for it all morning, and Voss filled his lungs. Attention on deck. The command hit the hangar like a single physical thing. 80 pairs of boots came together in one sound. One crack of leather on concrete that rolled off the high steel ceiling and back. 80 spines went to rigid steel. Every Marine in the building snapped to attention in the same instant. Eyes front, arms locked. The whole formation gone from a murmuring crowd to a wall of motionless green between one breath and the next. Sergeant Poots snapped to attention too. He did it out of pure reflex. 27 years of a body trained to a word before his mind had any say in it. His heels came together. His arms went to his sides, his chin came up, and his eyes locked forward. Forward at the woman he had called Contract Girl. The silence that followed the command was total. 80 Marines held it. The grounded jets held it under their red tags. The hot blue morning poured through the open bay doors and lay across the polished concrete. And into that silence walked the only sound that mattered. The measured footsteps of a general officer crossing his own wing's hangar floor. Major General Doyle Ferris walked into his hangar. 2 stars. The commander of the Marine Aircraft Wing. 53 years old. 30 years in the Corps, flanked by aides. He came through the door and the formation held its rigid silence. He walked down the open lane between the chairs, past the reviewing stand, past the senior staffer. The senior staff who had arranged themselves to receive him, past every officer who outranked the sergeants and the staff sergeants. He walked straight to the woman in the field-grade uniform at the edge of the floor. And Major General Ferris, 2 stars, 30 years, rendered her the first courtesy. "Colonel Marlowe," he said, and his voice carried in the silence to every corner of the hangar. "Kestrel, the wing is glad to have you. I hear you have already been walking your floor." 2 days early, sir," she said, "found a few things, so I am told." Ferris let his eyes move once across the 4 red-tagged aircraft, then back to her. "Walk me through them when the formation is released. I would rather hear it from the officer who crawled the wheel well than from a slide." "Yes, sir." Sergeant Poots stood at rigid attention and watched the contractor become a colonel. He watched the eagles he had not seen on the blank Velcro appear, now on the collar of her service uniform, silver unmistakable. He watched the row of ribbons led by a distinguished flying cross. He watched a 2-star general address her by a call sign earned in combat. He watched her answer him as an equal, and the arithmetic of the last week ran through Sergeant Mason Poot all at once. He had pulled her hair. He had called her nobody. He had crowded her against a workbench and told her the floor would not lose. The floor was standing at attention around him, and the floor had a new owner, and he had spent a week building her case for her. The blood left his face in a single cold tide. His mouth opened, and nothing came out. His eyes, locked forward by the command he could not disobey, had nowhere to go but the eagles on her collar. Confusion, then disbelief, then recognition, then a horror so complete it drained him gray. Every word he the concrete in sheets he had spent on her came back to him at the position of attention, where he could not move and could not run and could not turn it into a joke. Floors for Marines who matter. You do not touch a jet on my floor. Word against the floor, and the floor does not lose. He had said all of it. To a distinguished flying cross. He had pulled the hair of the woman whose name was about to be read onto the very command he stood in. The floor did not lose. The floor did not lose. He had been right about that, simply been catastrophically wrong about who the floor belonged to. Colonel Marlowe did not look at him. Not yet. She turned to Major General Ferris, and without raising her voice, without a flicker of the satisfaction a smaller person would have shown, she handed him the morning's real business. "Bay 4 flies on a forged sign-off, sir," she said. "So do 3 others. Master Sergeant Voss grounded them yesterday on a safety basis. The records went green before the work was done. I have the photographs. I would like those aircraft impounded for a full records audit before anyone in this group straps into one of them. Ferris' jaw set. He had walked into a ceremony and found a flight safety failure with a paper trail. "Done," he said. "Master Sergeant Voss, sir, nobody touches those aircraft. Nothing on this flight line flies until the colonel's audit clears it." "Aye, sir, already tagged." And Sergeant Pute stood at attention in the center of it all, ghost white locked at the position. By a word he could not break, while his new commanding officer turned away from him and toward the grounded jets, and the whole hangar stood rigid and leant around the man who had pulled her hair. The reckoning did not need a raised voice. It needed only the truth applied by people with the authority to act on it. And that morning, the hangar had both. It took Colonel Marlowe one jeets. It took Colonel Marlowe one day to find what the paperwork had hidden for months. It took the institution one afternoon to act on what she found. Came off the concrete in sheets. The 4 grounded jets were pulled apart under the eyes of inspectors who answered to the wing and not to the floor. Bay 4's port brake line was exactly what she had said it was. Counter tension, a fitting backing off under its own safety wire. An aircraft that would have lost braking on a hot roll, out with a pilot in the seat. 2 of the other 3 carried discrepancies just as serious. Every one of them had gone into the maintenance system. Green, complete, signed up for flight under staff, Sergeant Bo Tackett's initials on fly day mornings ahead of the work. Tackett's quality assurance fraud came apart one record at a time. The audit did not care how many things he had signed correctly. It cared about the 4 jets he had signed into the sky on lies, and 4 was more than enough. When the inspectors walked his sign-offs back against the actual condition of the aircraft, the pattern was not subtle. Came off the concrete in sheets. It was a man who had decided that the schedule mattered more than the work, and who had taught a sergeant to enforce that math with his hands and his mouth so the schedule would never be questioned. The audit also found the thing Ferris had asked for. The habit did not start with Tackett. A culture of fly day haste had been quietly tolerated up the line for a year because the jets kept making their flight schedules, and nobody wanted to be the one who slowed the group down. It had taken a colonel crawling a wheel well in a stripped flight suit to make slowing down look like exactly what it was, the only thing standing between a maintenance shortcut and a folded flag. Major General Ferris gave his direction standing on the swept hangar floor, the formation long since released. The ceremony folded up around the investigation that had eaten it. "Relieve the sergeant of his billet," he said. "Refer the assault on Lance Corporal Salas, and refer the false security report on Colonel Marlowe, and get me the name of whoever taught this shop that you can sign a jet up before you have done the work, because Tackett did not invent that habit by himself." Pruitt was relieved that afternoon. The shove of Salas, witnessed by half a shop that no longer covered for him, and the false report filed to walk a colonel off her own flight line, went to the legal office together. The floor he had run through intimidation for 2 years did not say a word in his defense. It had already quietly stopped being his. Colonel Marlowe found Lance Corporal Sasa in the airframe's corner where the whole week had started. She had the Lance Corporal's written statement in her hand, the one Voss had told her to date and sign and keep in her cargo pocket, and she read it aloud, slowly, to Master Sergeant Voss. Every honest line of it. "You wrote the truth when it cost you something to write it," Marlowe said. "You stood by it with a sergeant's hands on your bench. That is the entire job, Lance Corporal. That is the whole thing they can never teach and never fake. Master Sergeant Voss is going to make sure the Corps notices. Already on it, ma'am, Voss said. There was something on his weathered face that had not been there Monday, something close to hope. Marlowe turned to him last, the maintenance chief who had matched a photograph to a face and grounded 4 jets on nothing but his own judgment and a stranger's. 11 words. You had tagged 4 aircraft against a quality assurance signature, she said. On your authority, knowing it would make you enemies in your own shop. Why? Because you were right, ma'am, Voss said simply. The heat came off the concrete in sheets, and because I have put 2 friends in the ground out of jets that somebody signed off in a hurry, I was not going to make it 3, not on my floor. Marlowe looked at him for a long moment, and the flat eyes warmed that single degree again. It is our floor now, Master Sergeant, she said, and it is going to be run honest. Dusk came down over the air station soft and gold. The formation was gone. The inspectors were gone. The 4 jets sat safe under their tags, and the hangar was quiet in the way only a working hangar gets quiet. Engines cooled, tools racked, the day's danger grounded. Colonel Adrian Marlowe stood alone at Bay 4, with Captain Liam Ostros' photograph in her breast pocket. Sheets, where she had carried it through every assumption of command for 15 years. Her phone lit in her hand, a message on an old frequency from a routing channel that was supposed to be closed. A call sign that had been written off a continent away years ago, retired into a folded flag and a name on a wall. Kestrel, drifter's bird, flew. Adriatic, come find out who is flying it. She read it twice. The hangar held its breath around her. 15 years she had carried Drifter as a closed book, a name on a wall, a folded flag. A daughter in North Carolina who was old enough now to remember a face she had been told she would forget. 15 years, and a dead man's call sign had just flown across her screen with a place attached to it. Then she squared the photograph in her pocket, the way she squared everything. And she reached up and killed the lights over Bay 4, and she walked toward the bay doors and the gold evening, and a question the dead were never supposed to be able to ask. To find out who was flying a dead man's call sign over the Adriatic.